The supposed title was Necessities, but we changed it in Beyond, because somehow the research made by Onsitestudio is going around urban problems. And today, what we think about our experience, our project has been going beyond necessities, is about trying to develop a different vision or reflection about the urban rule of architecture and project. In a very plain discourse, we reflect also with other architects that more or less most of the project we are facing with the competition or with the private charge, they're all given by a lot of necessity and without any real direction into the shape of the city or the situation of the urban form. There's no unique design of an urban space, and somehow necessities are the only question that client or administration or people asking for a project they have, and it's a very basic situation. This project that we are going to present, they're all going to try to demonstrate that we can go beyond necessities, try to focus on different elements which are maybe facing the urban context or a more complex situation than the functionalism or a mere necessity or needs, which are just the basis of the project. The first project is a project we made. Today on the newspaper there was an article about announcing the competition for the Castello area, but it's a strange situation because 1 year ago, together with Piovene Fabi, we participate to a call made by Triennale together with the Milanese administration about the Castello area. The problem faced by the administration and support by Triennale, it was a real necessity, but a very pragmatic one. And the point was to solve the pedestrian transformation of the former road going around the castle. And the proposal from Onsitestudio and Piovene Fabi was to transform a necessity, transforming just a problem of traffic into a research about the urban dimension of this problem and of this space. So we decided to change completely the area of the project, and we start doing the project in a huge dimension. We start also working about an investigation about elements in the history who were present before in the area, or they were not really physically present, but somehow they were part of the context. And the first one is a project by Antolini. This is the history of a big historical error, because Pinchetti and other author of a map, a famous map of Milan, in reality they place this project in the map as the Antolini Foro, but it was before to be realized. It was a foreshadowing idea of an urban space, very radical and with a huge and giant scale. The second reference is a project or a situation in Milan that few people know, which is a collective project, a very interesting procedure going around for 30, 40 years around the Austrian domination. And it was a big project about a landscape structure in the city. Milan has been the first city in Europe at the time working, producing the form of the city starting by landscape. It's a very unknown history about trying to do the form of the city through landscape and nature before the mineral block, the dimension of the city. Canonica and other, they participated in the project. This is a map showing the situation, the real situation after Antolini failure and the construction of the city with this system. And this is a map of the city in that moment. The project of the rampart and the green element going around has been the real shape of the city during 1 century before the city got to complete the real shape and the real density of the city. So what is interesting is nature and landscape has been a real urban infrastructure, just not being a mere decorative system or something which was in antithesis with the artificial part of the city. This is a zoom about some part from Porta Venezia, which is close to here, to the center, to the area of the castle. And what is special is the landscape system is made by trees, and they are not merely designing a line following the street, but they're producing a double or a 4-line system, which is producing rooms instead of just being lines. These are some studies we made, some element. Many of you know Via Marina, for example. And then we start doing an operation. The investigation was about finding the limit of the project. It was not just the problem of the road, like the administration thought, and we guess and we hope they're not still thinking just about the traffic problem, but to find out the dimension of the void, because we thought that in the end, void is the dimension and proportion of the urban space. So we consider a huge area as a unique system, which is made, it's a strange space, goes from San Babila to Parco Sempione, and it's a strange space made of object in the void. And also reference to historical example demonstrate that it's not a problem of we are now obsessed, talking about landscape, about the antithesis between nature and artificial element. And in this case, all the history of this place, it's interesting because it's demonstrating that there's no contraposition. They were working together, and there's a special quality and character and atmosphere of this space, also when it's a void and it's made of natural element. It's a very urban space. These are other elements from Collezione Bertarelli. And then we made an investigation about which was the dimension of that space, considering the huge area. And what you see on the right, it's a number of examples of different piazza in Europe and in the world to try to set up the scale and dimension of our project with respect to other cases. And this is also the huge scale of the void compared with other void spaces. This is the project, a three-dimensional vision. This is the existing situation, which is very linked to something that we want to avoid, just the dimension of the urban furniture or element. The south side of the castle, it's actually, you can see it's a garden without any real quality. It's just made of a small scale element, while the Alemania project is really finishing on the north side. And we propose a unique element which is connecting all space using void as a structure. We continue the element around the castle with 4 lines of trees, producing rooms and space to be lived, and we left the void to be the real place. The history, it's kind of strange because the consultation asked for a tiny project, just a 300-meter element, the real problem, the traffic one, just to do it very fast for Expo. And that's why what you see here in the castle now is just the arrangement or a little space. And what we proposed to the administration, it was to stop with urban furniture or very fast and short and temporary development, stop wasting money, and to produce project with a urban scale and urban perspective also in terms of time. I go very fast. These are some sections of the temporary arrangement and the definitive one. This was a beautiful map showing, as in other projects, that the point is not producing space according to function, but displacing function and the complexity of the city according to the morphology of the urban space. And this was it's been a very hard work from a lot of people in the office and also in the PVN1, producing a book to show the project in a very sophisticated way to show the importance of having a big perspective instead of doing just a temporary arrangement. These are some images of the space, and this is a huge model. It was displayed in Triennale. It was a 1:100 scale model with 2 meter by 1.5 meters to show the atmosphere and the relationship with material and space in the real time. Okay. This is the second project we'll show. It's a public project, it's a school. It's a competition we won 1 year ago, more or less. It was a restricted competition with an international jury, with Professor Magnago Lampugnani from Zurich. And the project is interesting in terms of the investigation about the same problem. They got a necessity, which was a functional program, merely functional, all given by a series of data and percentage in terms of use of space or dimension for each square meter for each child and so on. And we decided to face the problem as an urban problem in a space without any urban dimension. This is a new development in the northeast of Milan. It's close to Expo. It's Cascina Merlata. And it's the typical urban space without any real rule or reference or so on, with use of space coming from a modernist idea about using space just as a distance without any real quality or naming the space. And the idea, a modernist idea, was in this area, was usually doing the operation about placing one block in the center of a garden. Our idea was to give an urban atmosphere to the only public building of the area, which was the school. And we decided to work in the opposite. Instead of producing an object lost in a void, we try to give an urban presence, also then you see about the material and the construction, a physical presence, a consistency to the object, taking the reference to an urban block. In Milan, this is Collegio Elvetico, there are some examples of big structure enclosing space, but having a big reference for scale or for physical presence with the city. And also, there was a theme about persistence of some element. We got to to keep one chimney from a former brick site that has been completely destroyed because in the meanwhile they kept the chimney, but they destroyed everything in the project since the competition, because they got to make room for thousands of bus for Expo. This is the big Expo parking for a big bus. And so the only element we could keep is the chimney that you will see. It's part of the project. And this is what we want to point out, is about losing the relationship with the functions, which are usually producing a relationship with typology and their form. The form of the school is something which is in many cases given. And instead of this, we concentrate, like the ancient cities doing, about the morphology of the city, the quality of the space. There are 3 courtyards with different proportion and quality, and the relationship with different part of the plan. This is a study we made about some cases in Milan to find out which was the correct form for courtyard, for example, and the relationship between the body, the mass of the building, and the void. And so you will see in the project there are a series of different courtyard, free courtyard with different proportion, 8 dimension, each one with a different tone and atmosphere related to the space which is going around.
Yes, what we were interested in also in this survey of these buildings was the fact that these buildings have a big richness of interior spaces and a big complexity without being so much complex formally. So we were, for example, watching how to enter into the complex where there were the stairs and the main circulation of the organism, and also how the connection between the courts were let's say, managed. So in some way we, let's say, try to steal something about the richness of this building, and we try to put them into this new organism, which is a very compact one. It's something like a building of buildings. It's more or less 5 buildings that are stuck together in a way that they can be perceived individually, but they form an overall form. You see in the color, there are different colors. One is the kindergarten, the other one is the elementary school, and the other one is the, let's say, from 3 to 6 to from 6 to 11, and from 11 to 14. So that was the challenge. There are 800 children to be placed in this school, so you can imagine how complex is the functional system that has to support this form. And then there's a gym and a big canteen for all the children. So this function are the part of this big complex. In the ground floor plan that you can see now, you see how the dimension of the courts are varied and try to be as rich as the historical reference that we were talking about before. So you see in the north part the porosity of the entrance, and then the 3 courts on the left side, the children of the kindergarten, and then the 2 courts that are connected to, through a portico. And on the right side, you see the big court that is opening towards the landscape with the pre-existing condition of the chimney, which is quite a visual reference and also a physical one. What we were interested in, as Gian Carlo was telling you before, is that this building was to be very different from the one of the Cascina Merlata complex, which were open and very high. This building was to be very low, a low profile in the garden and in the park. And most of all, our strategy was based on the idea that the public building has to face directly the park. It has not to be an object detached from the public space, but it has to be really on the edge of the plot. So that was probably the main reason that led us to this kind of scheme. These are the strategies that we were showing you before about the richness of the spaces, the relation between the courtyards, the dimension of the interior circulation, and let's say multiplicity of the entrances, and the idea that all these 3 courts had to have a very distinctive and different character in terms of dimension and compression of the space. So you see the small one for Scuola dell'Infanzia, the big one for Scuola Primaria, and then Scuola Media was a kind of middle-sized court. And also the fact that the classrooms, which are, you know that a school is more or less a simple sequence of rooms, is nothing more than a simple sequence of rooms. The fact that these rooms had to face, sometimes to face into a private place, a very intimate one, and sometimes could go outside to see the city and the landscape. So all these concepts were, let's say, organized in this plan, which of course I will not describe you very detailedly because it's not so important now. But it's important for us, it's the fact that all these rooms are more or less organized in a very clear way, and try to face the necessity, as Gian Carlo was telling you before, of the acoustic, which is one of the main purpose of school. Today we are totally obsessed by acoustic. Of course, it's an issue, but it's sometimes things are much more than the necessity itself. So we try to manage the acoustic in a way that the building was the main solver of this thing. So not to work with glass or with other, let's say, technical things, but to work with the form of the building. So the rooms are, let's say, protecting themselves with the architecture. This is the ground floor. This is the first floor. It's a 2-floor building, and this is the underground level where there is the gym that is more or less sunken in the earth to be more protected from the park. In terms of the character of the building, we were also thinking about having an organism that could have different characters. In the same way, what we were looking at the building of the historical reference was to have a building with different characters. So some places with let's say, a monumental and let's say an aura of the public building, and some other places which could be more intimate and more, let's say, private. So we try to have a calm sequence of openings in these facades, trying to select very few geometrical figures to make the composition of the facade, which is quite plain and peaceful, let's say. In the section you see that the inclination of the roof is the formal device that enable us to make the overall form consistent and let's say blocked in a form. So we have different inclination, but more or less all the roofs try to be more figurative than the simple flat roof of the generic school that we see around the city. You see here the lower courtyard for the youngest children, and then the bigger one, which is the entrance one, and then the big one with the chimneys facing the park. And this is the maquette of the competition that we made just to demonstrate this variation of these 3 big pieces and the other elements that are added in an overall form. This is the entrance of the school, and over there's the park. So in some way, the building is occupying the entire plot with his own, let's say, figure. Not to have, the usual gardens that you see in between the public building and the public square. Another theme that we were interested in was this notion that we also read in some reflection on English architects about the schoolness. That is to say, something that the character of the building has to be related to a background. The building has not to emanate too much, but it has to, in some way, control himself to allow the variety and the richness of the everyday life to be the starring and the effective element of the overall image. So, in some way, we try to have very restful and peaceful facades also in the courtyard. You see now this is a big model that we made of the big courtyard, and the passage from the big courtyard to the medium one. In some way, we tried also to reduce the forms of the windows in order to have few elements to define the elevations. This is the smaller the smallest courtyard of the kindergarten. When you see it's just one floor and it's more intimate, it's something like a house-like space. It has nothing to do with let's say, monumentality that we're trying to have in some other spaces of the school. So it's the more delicate one. The relation between the classes and these courtyards is very important for the project, because you know that one of the challenge of the contemporary school is to dedicate a lot of time for the activities in the courtyards and outside the school. So we were really facing this problem of having a connection between the classes and the outside space. So this is one of the rooms of the kindergarten. This one is one of the primary school. Okay, and then there was the theme of the construction, which is always something that forces us to have solution that can face all the troubles that we have in Italy about the construction of public buildings. So we tried also here to reduce things and to think about a material that could solve all the building. So it's the only material, which is the clinker, is trying to, let's say, be the only element that gives the tone of the entire complex. The frames of these big windows facing on the outside are articulated in fixed glazed windows, and as you can see here, and golden shutters in order to enhance the richness of this very simple facade, which are always working also on the thickness of the wall. So the construction is a very traditional one. You know that for schools there's a problem of maintenance, so to be low tech, let's say, it's a good strategy to make buildings that last and have no problems in terms of maintenance and realism. This school is quite interesting because it's a place where the idea of connection between inside and outside is well resolved. It's a place called in Via Macmaon in Milan. And also, we were also a little bit fascinated about this because it was a construction in which the presence of the material was quite strong. It was a reference for the choice of the constructing strategy of our project. Here you see some pattern of how the skin and the texture of the clinker could be managed in order to vibrate and to have kind of enlightened wall with a very low and simple material. You know that this material has a long tradition in Milan, and we also saw wonderful buildings, school buildings in Milan. We thought that it was a really good strategy to use it in a contemporary way. And here you will see some images of the competition project that we won, as Gian Carlo was telling you, maybe 1 year and a half, 1 year ago. And we are now developing the executive drawings and the drawings for the approvals. So this is the facade of the gym, probably the more public facade of the building, because it faces a big square inside the park. And in the left side, you see the articulation of the volumes that I was telling you before. The mass, it's a bright one, a very vibrant. We would like that this material could, let's say, give richness to this very flat and calm elevations. The golden shutters, as I was telling you before, the entrance of the building, and the canopy of the entrance. The biggest court facing the chimney, with this idea of having an articulation of the wall to enhance also this quality of this tectonic quality of the wall. And then this is the facade in front of the park, which is the most public one and probably also the most grand, because of these 4 big windows that are connecting the Scuola Media into the park. So all these other windows are the connecting spaces. The only 4 rooms in the first floor are those one facing the park. So we were, like we were saying before, like Seminario, Svizzero, we were trying to have a face of the building that was totally engaging with the public space in front. And the entrance, which is characterized by the canteen, which is a little house trying to lower the scale of the building and to have a more intimate space here for the entrance. And then as soon as you are in the grand courtyard, you have a passage where the material, which is the same, changes color, as we were seeing before in these spaces. Change the colors and gets more vibrant and more rich, and it leads you to the central court, which is the heart of the building, and it's also the most expressive one in terms of cantilever and in terms of compression of the space. And over there you see the atrium of the building. Okay, the last, because it's very late, project is this project that has been completed a few weeks ago, and it's also a competition that we won 2 years ago, and the process was very quick because they wanted to open the building for the expo, and they succeed. It was a successful project, also if we had to face this rhythm with some choices that we had to manage some way. It's the place. It's quite extraordinary because it's one corner of the grand space which is fronting the Stazione Centrale. So it's a piece of a bigger building that was left here. So it was about demolishing this piece of building and make a new one that was more, let's say, efficient in terms of thermal insulation, structural consistency, and all other, let's say, necessities that an hotel has to have nowadays. So the client, Reale Mutua, was really, let's say, brave in, let's say, manage this thing, and it was really a tough, let's say, way to have the hotel open now. It's about this building, which is which was made by Mario Bacciocchi, who is a quite interesting architect, working in the 30s and in the 50s in Milan. He made a lot of pieces in Milan and also in Rome, and the character of the building that we were, let's say, facing was quite interesting because it had some characters that we wanted to really think about. It was, a piece of the new metropolis that was going to be built in the 50s after the war. This piece is at 56. So it was, okay, this is this place, as you see. it's one of the pieces that are composing this system, which is quite a monumental one. You see here a succession of steps from the beginning of the century to nowadays, in which you see how the space, the void, changed in terms of dimension, in terms of compression, and at the end, it's a quite interesting and monumental system that sometimes is a little bit pompous, as we see in Via Vittor Pisani, but for some other purpose, it's one of the big pieces of that the city built after the war. In this interesting image on the top of the image, you see how Baciocchi was thinking this entrance of the city. It was something like an homogeneous pattern that was interesting all the buildings that he was designing, trying to make a very monumental but also homogeneous and sober enter of the city. So we were attracted by these images, not because we had to, let's say, prove historically our project, but sometimes it seems that it's more important to understand the pieces than the scenario where you're working on to have good ideas to make your own project. So we were, for example, seeing Muzio's project for the entrance of the city, and the place where now there's one Muzio and one other building in Via Turati. And then also we were seeing some other reference of those years that were managing this idea of having the facade, enhancing the monumentality of the facade and the presence of the urban figure in terms of double-eighting the floors or connecting lower buildings in the side street, or having different aids depending on the function and depending on the overall design. So all this was something like re-elaborated and was a little bit thought. Here you see the building that we were working. So you see the color changing in this little strip of building. So this is the structural joint where we had to, let's say, stack and graft our piece. And also here you see the relation between the kind of city that we were working, that was the stony and the, let's say, lasting city of the 30s and the 50s, and then over there, the new contemporary city with glazed facade that we were trying to not to import, let's say, in this system, which was quite consistent. This is the facade of the building that has been demolished, and one of the characters that we really loved was the idea of the material, and which is also clinker, little tiles of clinker, and the fact that the thickness, 25 centimeters, could manage shadows and could also have a really strong presence of the facade. Then when we demolished, we saw that we could measure the things, and it was quite nice for us to see how it worked. And also the color, to manage the color. We had to manage the relationship between the pieces that was remaining and the new piece. So managing the color could guarantee a better, let's say, involvement of the new in confronting of the pre-existence. So this is the strategy, more or less. It's something like an abstraction of Baciocchi's scheme. The idea to get double the height of the figurative element and to, let's say, abstract a little bit the device of the glazing and the spandrel and the vertical elements. So we try to manage this element, this elementary element, to be the expressive principle of the new building. And then we were also trying to understand the exact dimensions in terms of proportion, in terms of depthness of the facade. Okay, this is the maquette that we made for the competition and the image. And this image that was, let's say, more or less our statement, which was, let's say, putting it together different things. So let's say the materiality of the Baciocchi building and also the verticality of the structure of the tower that we are facing. It was something like making a resonance of different things and putting it in a new piece, not for nostalgia, but because we think that sometimes this kind of reflection can be generative to have a new design in continuity with the city, with the surrounding city. The plans are quite generic. The challenge was to manage this thickness of the building, which is really thin. So the challenge was to put most of the rooms in front, of course, of the public space, to engage with the quality of the grand square, and to put all the services in the back in order to concentrate all the problems, let's say, on the back. It was very pragmatic, and the only thing was to, let's say, guarantee the standards, you know, that hotel necessities are really strict. So in some way, this problem of the organization of the typical plan was a secondary one, and leads us to find the qualities of the project in the elevation, in the construction of the facades, and in other elements, rather than you know, working on the plan that some other times is worth. But in that occasion, the section and the plan was not given, but quite generic, which is something that happens a lot in the city. So this is the 9th floor, and then the rooftop where it was supposed to have a wonderful bar, but unfortunately the business plan said that it was a suite, it was not a bar. It's a pity. Okay, so you see the very simple strategy of the plan, the different dimension of the facade in front of the square, this one, and through Via Napotoriani, which is the secondary street, was managed by changing the base of the rooms and of the structural model. So some way it seems everything equal, but it's different. The dimension of the rooms and the structural base is quite different. And here you see the richness of the spaces of the rooms, which was not you know, a typological choice of us. It was not generated, but okay, we want to have a suite, a junior suite or something like that, but it was the result of having rules and then engaging these rules with the morphology of the place. This is an image that we very shortly of an exhibition that we did last year, showing the project that was going to be built, and we chose this site in Milan because we were interested on this quality. And we were trying to, let's say, steal this quality to put inside our project. That is to say, this quality is the fact that there are some specific places in the city where you can feel this environmental quality, the fact that the buildings of the 30s, of the 50s, of the 60s, let's say, resonate together and in some way make an overall space which is very high quality and let's say can be, as I was telling you before, generative for the project. So that was our strategy, our, let's say, ambition of our project, which was represented here in this little maquette. So this is the building of Bacciocchi, and this is the project. The section, as you see, it's, you know, it's like the joke, find the difference. And it seems everything the same, but this is not, of course, because as I was telling before, the bases are changing, the height of the floors are changing, and also there are all the corners and all the other things. So the construction of the facade was managing these different elements and trying to, let's say, make this possible in a very short time. So at the beginning of the construction, which was of course, one of the main focus of our worries, was having this concrete element that were, of course, not load-bearing, but were massive. And this was a little bit managed, and we tried to have a technical system. I show you this because it's very important about the things that we're telling you tonight, the necessities. This was a necessity to have nearly zero energy buildings. It was the top of the thermal insulation building. So we wanted to manage this not in a technical way, but trying to, let's say, be more urban as possible. So this was possible with this work on the section and on the prefabrication of the element, which is a glass reinforced concrete element made precast, of course, with this huge metal element made, let's say, in a certain way, it's precast, but it's a kind of art craftsman. It's quite art craftly. So it's not everything is not equal. You will see from the photo that also the color and some details are, we like this kind of imprecision of the precast element. This was the mock-up. Okay, and this is some images of few days ago when the hotel is already already okay, and it's running, and it was a quite big satisfaction to see it. Yeah, to feel, yes, it's quite full, yes. So here you see the relation between the new piece and the Bacciocchi one. So with the geometrical reference and also with the material connection. I didn't tell you that the overall design is made by a 3-floor portico and 4 double floors, and then a single floor of the 9th floor where there's suites, and then another double floor for the suite of the terrace that was, let's say, providing us, let's say, an overall element of conclusion of the building, also in terms of protection of all the plants. So, as I was saying you before, the base of this element are changing from this facade to this other one, and then here we have to face with the dimension of also this building, which is also an element for the 50s. And I just would like to show you also this thing. We had to face with this form. We try to maintain the 25 centimeters of Bacciocchi building and to manage the differences between one floor to another one with this plane, which is oblique, and is changing every 2 floors. So as soon as you can see here, every 2 floors, these elements is thinning, let's say, evoking the vertical structural thinning of the tower that we have in front of the Pirelli Tower. So as you was telling you before, the abstraction of the element. So also here the glazed element is fixed, and the openable is an opaque one, and the portico with this vertical element, which is organized by vertical and horizontal element, which are exterior to the glazed facade, and not interior like a generic one, just to have a more strong presence of the structure of this 9-meter vertical plane with the terrazzo. Okay, the suite, people washing the windows, and also this is the roof garden with all the plants, and some images from the interior. Of course, the quality of the space of the rooms is the fact that you can see the metropolis from inside, from your bed. Okay, we would like to thank also Tommaso Brambati, Filippo Fagioli, Simone Marmori, Michele Miserotti, Chiara Molinari, Andrea Morstabilini, Lorenzo Dorizzi e Sebastian Sanchez. Thank you.